Welcome to This Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because honestly, we're going to unlock a completely different way of looking at language learning. If you've ever felt stuck trying to improve your English speaking skills because you're kind of just out there on your own, you are in exactly the right place. We're going straight to the source today, unpacking some really fascinating insights on how you can dramatically improve your spoken English without needing anyone else in the room. So let's just get right into it.
So how do you actually practice speaking when you don't have a partner? It's this solitary struggle that so many of us face, and it can be incredibly frustrating, right? I mean, you've got the drive, you really want to speak fluently. You're studying all the materials, but then you look around and there's literally nobody to talk to. It feels like hitting a brick wall. How in the world are you supposed to practice the physical, actual act of speaking when you're just sitting by yourself in your room?
Okay, let's dive into part 1, the solo speaking dilemma. To figure out how to move forward, we first really need to look at why our traditional study methods are completely failing us when it comes to spoken fluency. First, there's what you think works, and let's be honest, it's what traditional schooling trained all of us to think works, right? We spend hours agonizing over grammar rules, and we do a ton of passive listening. But the harsh reality, studying grammar alone is never, ever going to improve your speaking. Just listening to English alone won't do it either. Now, contrast that with what actually works. You have to actually speak out loud. That is the only way. But, of course, that brings us right back to the main problem. How do we do that alone?
Which brings us to section 2, the true definition of imitation.
So this right here is the pivot. This is our core solution. It's a highly specific, really advanced technique that completely removes the need for a speaking partner. True imitation is listening to a conversation, a story, or a speech, and then delivering that speech in your own words. Now notice what isn't there. I'm not talking about just repeating after a native speaker, using the exact same words like a parrot just to practice pronunciation. No way. Mere parroting doesn't force your brain to generate language. Real imitation is about actively expressing thoughts and ideas. And this brilliantly illustrates the difference. Let's look at this side-by-side example from our source material about a childhood memory. The original speaker says, "When I was a child." Now, look at how the imitator handles it. The imitator says, "when he was a child." Do you see that shift? The imitator isn't just mindlessly repeating "I," they are actively processing that information and reconstructing it entirely from a third-person perspective.
Watch how this builds too. The original speaker continues, "My parents like to pretend." And the imitator actually processes that and outputs, "His parents liked to pretend." See, you have to actually think about what's being said to make these pronoun shifts on the fly like that. You are literally building the sentence structure in your own mind. And just finishing that thought, "that Santa Claus would bring us presents" becomes "that Santa Claus would bring them presents." This proves the point perfectly, doesn't it? The ultimate goal here isn't to just memorize a script. The goal is to successfully comprehend an idea, hold it in your head, and then deliver that idea out loud using your own active vocabulary and grammar structures. That is what real speaking practice looks like.
All right, moving on to section 3, easy to hard progressive training. Now that we know what true imitation actually is, how do we, actually implement it? Well, the source material points out that studies find progressive training to be highly effective. Because, let's be real, you can't just jump into a complex 10-minute TED Talk on day 1. Here is the exact methodology, mapped out for you. Step 1. Start small. Imitate phrases and short sentences. Just get comfortable manipulating small pieces of information. Once you master that, you scale the difficulty to step 2. Wait until the speaker completes a much longer thought, or maybe an entire group of sentences. Pause the audio and try to express that whole idea yourself. Finally, step 3. Listen to an entire short speech or story, and then deliver the whole thing on your own. You intentionally force yourself to get better by slowly turning up the heat. And for maximum results, our source actually recommends combining all of these approaches together into one big training session. And now for the best part. Section 4, the magic of implicit learning.
This is where we reveal the hidden superpower of this progressive imitation technique and why it works so much better than staring at a textbook. First off, there are the immediate, tangible benefits. By imitating real, day-to-day conversations, you are constantly listening to and outputting correct English. This naturally trains you to form sentences properly. You aren't just memorizing dry vocabulary lists, you're actively mastering idioms, expressions, and the actual speaking patterns that native speakers use out in the real world.
But here is the absolute best part, implicit learning.
This is the process where learning happens completely without your awareness. When you do this easy-to-hard imitation, you are actually learning grammar implicitly. Think about it. This is exactly how babies and children learn the grammar rules of their very first language. I mean, they don't study textbooks, right? They listen, they imitate, and they absorb the rules subconsciously while just trying to communicate their needs.
So please take this to heart. Focus entirely on understanding and expressing ideas. Do not obsess over why the present perfect tense is used in a specific situation. Seriously. When you're imitating, do not overthink the grammar rules. I promise you, by actively reconstructing these sentences aloud, you are still learning the grammar, but you're doing it subconsciously. It's actually one of the most proper and natural ways you could possibly learn grammar.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. And I really want to leave you with this question. Are you ready to learn like a child again? We spend so much time as adults trying to just force language into our brains through sheer willpower and these rigid, boring rules. But by using this easy-to-hard imitation technique, you can bypass all of that frustration. You can practice speaking entirely on your own, implicitly absorb the grammar, and start expressing your own thoughts fluently. So grab a piece of audio, start small, and start imitating today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.